You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
So as these vaccine mandates keep a-coming, one more department after yet another segment of people and employees gets mandated that got to have the jab for the job. Fire department. That's what we're talking about today. Seattle Fire Department, New York Fire Department. It's estimated by some accounts that the city of Seattle right now is paying $100,000 a day in overtime. Why is that? Well, because we don't have enough firefighters to keep the city safely going, and we're having to take the existing firefighter force, have a bunch of them do overtime on the daily just to keep up basic protection of the city. That's what we're doing. And so when these politicians come on board and say, well, we've got game plans for this. Well, the game plan is a temporary overtime plan. And it's like, okay, yeah, but you can't do that long term. And you just basically laid off how many hundreds of employees? And in the case of New York, how many thousands of firefighters over the vaccine mandate, when we know that these systems, these public safety systems and structures, they were short-staffed to begin with. And yet you're just taking a little bit more away from them, and let's just see how they do. All right, so is the city of Seattle paying $100,000 in overtime right now to keep the fire department running just kind of bare bones? That's what we're going to check into. Before we do, if you're new here, welcome. My name is Sean Reynolds. I own a couple of real estate companies, and I read the news from that perspective. All right, let's do this. Starting off with a Jason Rantz article. Seattle Fire turns units offline because they don't have enough people to support those units being online. They spend hundreds of thousands in overtime. All right, let's get down to it. Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan's COVID-19 mandate has caused a historic staffing crisis within the Seattle Fire Department. We've heard so much about the police, right? Because we had that whole defunding of the police thing. Now it's spilling over into the fire department. Yeah, we're seeing that across the country. And this is Seattle, New York. I mean, those are a couple of the big stories, but you'll see this in a ton of other cities as well. Seattle Fire Department is routinely turning units offline due to a lack of staff. Not good. The department is leaning on significant overtime hours to fill open 24-hour shifts. You've got to remember the fire department. Those guys work. Those are long shifts. I remember my father-in-law, Everett Fire Department up north, 24-hour shift. All right, we'll see you in a day and a half or so. Not only does this lead to staff burnout, but the Seattle Fire Department, not San Francisco, Seattle, is spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in the process. But it's still not enough. And it's not enough because this is a stopgap program. Well, we've got too few officers. Let's just squeeze them not officers, but firefighters and officers too. Let's just squeeze them for some overtime and we'll just limp this bad boy along until we can't. From engines to aid cars, the department can't find enough staff to fill vacancies on weekends. The brownouts will likely extend into weekdays, stressing a department that was understaffed before the vaccine mandate. While the mayor finally acknowledged the staffing crisis at the Seattle Police Department, she's been silent about the Seattle Fire Department problems because there's just so many problems. I mean, and most of these have been self-imposed, right? I mean, when you go to cut the police budget by 50%, what do you expect will happen? Do you think you're going to have cops lined up even when you throw out $25,000 signing bonuses? That's literally what we're doing here in Seattle. Seattle Fire Department went into Halloween weekend, this was just last weekend, knowing it would be downstaffed in significant numbers. Still, Seattle Fire Department is downplaying the crisis, claiming to have only separated from 7. That's exactly what the police department did too. Internally, however, Chief Harold Scoggins sounded some alarms. I think we said it was 6 were let go in the Seattle Police Department, but there's like 100 when you consider everybody who's basically not available to work their police job right now. There was another 100 that basically got swept out to sea with the last mandate. There will be shifts where staffing falls below 220, and we have to take units out of service, Scoggins wrote in an email, all-staff email last Wednesday. I want to encourage you to sign up for any overtime shifts you can work. We know weekend shifts are harder to fill with that whole family thing and all, kids, wife, whatever, husband, spouse, significant other. You don't really need to spend any time with your significant others, do you? I mean, we've made it such a great city for you to work in that we'd like you to just work overtime forever. So we know weekend shifts are harder to fill, and with many special events happening, like the holiday season and the holidays nearing, we need your help even more. Well, why would they want to help out? I mean, this is what they do for a living, and yet you've created a situation where staffing is next to impossible to hold this whole cobbled system together, right? Saturday staffing was minimally impacted due to overtime. Still, 2 aid cars are out of service, one in Northgate and another in downtown Belltown. But according to 2 sources, at least the following units were offline due to staffing shortages on Sunday. All right, so we had a 24-hour aid car in Belltown, 24-hour aid car in Capitol Hill, 24-hour aid car in Pioneer Square, one in Belltown. Just, you get the picture. There's a bunch. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 that are basically not available. Not going to have them running around. Additionally, one source says Rescue 1 is down to 1 rescue tech, only running with 3 instead of 4. 2 of the online units were sent to the Seahawks game on Sunday. All right, and at least we're keeping the Seahawks covered. The city is without firefighters today, one firefighter tells me. Someone will die as a result. All right, a lot of folks say, yeah, but you only hear that on the conservative stuff, on the Republican side of things, on the right side of things. Nobody's dying. Nothing sideways is happening, and it's not going to happen. That's just all rhetoric. That's just all their opinion. Well, when you start to look at the hard numbers, you're kind of like, yeah, but this isn't good, and we're supposed to have this many firefighters. We're supposed to have this many crews available. We're supposed to have this many police officers available. And we just don't. And a lot of cities across the United States are experiencing the same thing. And you need those police officers. And yet you need those officers, the firefighters, to be able to go out. And you just don't have the numbers to support it. So at some point in time, you're going to have a major event and people are going to go, oh, yeah, not good. Maybe we should hire some more, first responders. Last weekend, they experienced similar issues, talking about the Seattle Fire Department. On Saturday, October 23rd, Seattle Fire Department had 5 units and Air 10 out of service, Seattle Fire Department confirmed, but it usually only confirms after constant prodding and public shaming. Because they don't want to let the cat out of the bag. Hey, we just don't have enough to really keep you guys safe. It knows when units are offline, but it withholds that information when initially asked. Now, there's no sense in rocking the boat, but people need to know, right? We need to know. Okay, yeah, there aren't enough to really keep us all that protected in the event of some catastrophe. So here's where we get to the real numbers on how much overtime is being paid. And this is how we are keeping this thing cobbled together. We need you guys to work some more. Seattle Fire spends somewhere between $32,000 and $100,000 a day on overtime, depending on who you ask. After downplaying the numbers of staff sidelined due to Durkan's vaccine mandate, Seattle Fire Department now acknowledges the mandate impacted at least 84. Remember, this is to a staff that's already down on numbers as well, right? This does not account for the early retirements before the vaccine mandate deadline hit. Of the 84, 72 are members of operations, including firefighter, EMT, firefighter, paramedics, and chief officers. These are boots on the ground people, right? If we average the 72 number across our 4 platoons or shifts, that equals approximately 18 overtime positions per day needing to be filled. With this estimate, the department is currently spending approximately $32,500 per day for overtime, specifically as a result of the mandate, Seattle Fire Department spokesperson Kristen Tinsley told the Jason Rantz Show. All right, so this is the Seattle Fire Department spokesperson So that's your low end. That's going to be your low end estimate, right? Because you don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to have people screaming, oh my gosh, the earth is going to end. Our lives as we know it are done. Don't have enough fire protection. Tinsley also acknowledges this number does not account for additional overtime spots we fill daily due to current vacancies not accounted for in the above funding amount provided. All right. So how about $100,000 a day in overtime? Is that the high end? Seattle Fire Department Lieutenant Jeff Vale from the union thinks the department's figures are low. He says it's more like $100K a day. So they have called 60 or 80, somewhere between 60 and 80 firefighters in those vacant seats who would normally be off that day. And they're paying them time and a half to do so. And that equates to conservatively $100,000 a day in overtime. That's totally unnecessary, Vale said on the Jason Rant Show, speaking personally and not on behalf of the Seattle Fire Department. All right. So is that a high number? Is that a realistic number? So we're somewhere between 30 grand and 100 grand. Vale notes his calculation includes the average pay of a firefighter plus time and a half, overtime. And they're long shifts, right? 24-hour shifts. And you've got paramedics who get paid more, okay? You've got lieutenants who get paid more than the average firefighter, okay? You've got captains who get paid even more than the average firefighter. You got to bring them in. And then you have the regular firefighters, Vale explained. So yeah, I'm ballparking that average. That's why I say conservatively $100,000 a day is what there is, what they're approximately looking at right now over the weekend and today when they're just down on numbers. Every time you take a certain segment of the workforce out, you're going to have to pay other workforce to cover for them. We're somewhere between, maybe it is $100,000 a day. That's incredible. But what do we normally pay? That's some of the numbers I don't know. But in all of these scenarios right now, we just know that with the vaccine mandates and everything else that's gone on, yesterday's heroes to today's zeros, it feels like that's what the first responders are really experiencing, right? And why do we keep harping on this stuff on a real estate podcast? There's that little thing of public safety. It's important. It really is. Just ask somebody when they have something really bad happen to them and they call 911 and they either don't get a response or we'll get to you when we can. Maybe we'll send an officer in an hour. Not really sure. But even if we do take your statement, not a lot we can do because we're out doing all the other stuff. So 100 grand extra per day in overtime is an estimate out there that might not be just, wildly overstated. It might be realistic. We've been in a labor shortage forever. And in a labor shortage, when you have a business in the private sector, you don't fire employees and then go right back out and offer incentives to bring in more. You keep the ones you have. You figure that out. Not in the public sector. We're handling things differently. We've got a little different game plan here. So let's go take a look at the New York City firefighters. And I'm sure you've heard that story as well, right? New York City firefighters take medical leave amid looming vaccine sanctions. So everybody's getting hit with sanctions, all kinds of departments, whether you're state, just whatever entity you work for, that net has been thrown out there and more than likely you've been caught up in it. As of 5 p.m. Sunday, yesterday, the fire department in New York said its vaccination rate for firefighters was 75%. That's pretty good, right? No, we still got to let people off. Yesterday's heroes, today's zeros. Yeah, you guys can't work. No. At least 2,000 New York City firefighters have taken medical leave this past week, which some officials have labeled a protest as unvaccinated municipal workers in the city face the start of sanctions Monday. Irresponsible, bogus sick leave by some of our members is creating a danger for New Yorkers and their fellow firefighters. They need to return to work or risk the consequences of their actions. They are making a personal choice of a medical decision, and yet it's being indicated as bogus sick leave. That's interesting. And this was stated by Commissioner Daniel Negro, said over the weekend, according to NBC New York. Thousands of the workers had until 5 p.m. last Friday to show proof that they had received at least one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. Those who don't get on board will be placed on unpaid leave starting Monday, today, a scenario that has labor unions warning of staffing shortages. I feel like, we just talked about that, didn't we? Yeah, staffing shortages. Did you guys hear that AC/DC's Thunderstruck just passed 1 billion views on YouTube? I mean, with all this really depressing stuff that really impacts our lives, that's not good, you got to have some uplifting stuff every now and then. 1 billion views for Thunderstruck. If you don't know the song Thunderstruck, you should probably Google that. You should probably do a search for that on YouTube and watch that. Oh, it's great. Brian Johnson at his prime in like 1990, lead singer that took over for Bon Scott. You got Angus Young on the guitar, just doing his catwalk thing where he hops along and just plays the guitar. Malcolm Young playing bass. Got their drummer guy just going. You hear Thunderstruck at major games. 1 billion views. 1 billion people watched AC/DC's Thunderstruck because it's that good. There's only a few videos out there like that. But, every now and then when we're talking about these really depressing topics like, okay, if you have a really bad fire, we're hosed. You got to lighten it up with some ridiculous content that makes you feel a little bit better. I feel a little bit better knowing that AC/DC's Thunderstruck video, 1 billion views. That's important stuff to me. That's important. On Saturday, over this weekend, U.S. Representative Nicole Malliotakis from New York said that 26 New York fire stations had closed due to Mayor Bill de Blasio's decision to lock unvaccinated firefighters out of work. Got to close 26. The shortage of potentially thousands of firefighters will undoubtedly result in longer response times, leading to an increased potential for injury or death. That's the deal. When these first responders aren't available, what happens? It's not like, in other businesses, like in my business, for example, if a catastrophe happens, a home doesn't close. If an appraisal catastrophe happens, somebody doesn't get their appraisal PDF. It's missing. It's gone. What's going to happen? Are we going to get it to them? Are we going to get it to them in time for funding of that loan? Are we going to get it in time to close that transaction? I don't know. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? When you've got first responder issues, people die. That's the difference. That's the difference between most of what I do and most of what we're talking about here on these issues. An official told NBC New York that Fire Department New York, FDNY, members were being shifted around the city due to the sick calls, but a Negro fired back at reports and claims that staffing challenges forced the department to shutter a number of firehouses. The department has not closed any firehouses, he said, according to the station. The Uniformed Firefighters Association and the Uniformed Fire have denied sanctioning a sick-out. So the union's basically saying, no, that's not happening. We've got a contingency plan. The contingency plan is we need to have our guys and gals work a lot of overtime to make this go. As of 5 p.m. Sunday, the FDNY said its vaccination rate for firefighters was 75%, with the overall rate for all FDNY members at 80%. That's pretty high. I mean, how much higher do you need to really get? I mean, so many of these entities, you're like, okay, are you shooting for like 95% like they are in Australia before they return to normal, whatever that is? That whole December 1st thing where Australia was going to be able to kind of have some more of their freedom given back. Not so much. 95% vax rate. That's interesting, right? And then after that 95% vax rate comes and goes, does something else come up? Probably. Mayor de Blasio defended the mandate at a virtual news briefing, saying his job was to keep people, my employees, and 8.8 million people safe. Right. That's what first responders do. And it seems like we're going against the grain of logic here, right? Got to keep my employees and 8.8 million people safe. Right. And until we defeat COVID, people are not safe. If we don't stop COVID, New Yorkers will die, the mayor added. And if there aren't enough police officers and or firefighters to go around, I think they're going to expire also due to those circumstances, which could have been avoided. Over the weekend, the FDNY said that excessive sick leave had yet to impact the department's response time. That's what we keep hearing. That's what the official statement is. But at some point in time, you're going to have some event happen where this stuff goes sideways and the spotlight is put on one of these entities and you're like, oh, that's what happens when you don't have enough first responders to respond to whatever. Here is the fallout. Here is what goes on. Here's the downside. These people were left stranded doing whatever, couldn't get the help they needed. This happened to them. I think you're going to see that here at some point in time in some city in the United States. And then the big focus will be on how can we improve public safety? What can be done? It's just this full cycle of where we've been. Defund the police, 50%. Genius idea to, oh yeah, about that didn't really work out all that well. We'd sure like to hire you here in Seattle. New York, we'd sure like to hire you here in New York City. We'd love to have you come on board. Instead of just working with the employees that you have already. Experienced employee retention. That's a thing. You keep employees that are, you bend over backwards to keep them going because you've got a lot of time and money invested in them. They have a lot of time and money invested in their careers. And you don't just kick them to the curb. But apparently in 2021, you do. And so we're just going to have to see kind of the impact that this has. But yeah, not really looking forward to that. Maybe we get through it without, some singular event that just really spotlights how these numbers are impacting us. Maybe we'll get through and maybe we'll look back and go, yeah, that was pretty rough, but we figured it out and we kind of got through it. I think at some point somewhere, something's going to go sideways. Some, major catastrophe is going to happen. Some city's not going to have enough folks to do what they need to first responder wise. And yeah, not going to be good. All right. And I don't go down the whole let's get everybody really worked up into a state of fear and then look around and go, well, yeah, not really much happened there. But these numbers that we're seeing, even if nothing happens, they're not long-term solutions as far as the way that the departments are handling overtime. And they're just expecting to take a short staff and spread it over, over what would normally be their typical coverage. You can't do that long-term. That's not going to work. So you got to get some more folks in there. You got to get some more worker bees, and those are firefighters, and those are police officers, and any other departments that are short-staffed. But you've got a labor shortage going, and for those folks, you may not be able to hire that many. There may not be just floating around out there, as so many industries are finding out. How about the whole vaccine mandate? Restaurants here in Seattle, that went into effect, last Monday? I've been in one restaurant where they've asked, hey, have you been vaccinated kind of thing? I've been in one restaurant where that has taken place. The rest, they don't have enough personnel to really cover what's going on. They don't have enough to be the vaccine mandate police. It's just not really happening. And that's here in Seattle. What's happening in the city that you live in? Is that happening there? I mean, have you been out and about where you're like, yeah, I've heard, maybe you're not vaccinated and you're like, okay, I know that restaurant I can go into. That one? Oh, definitely not. Is that happening? Feels like that's happening out there too, right? So we got a lot of the state of flux type stuff. Just crazy. We're going to have to see what's going on. Earlier today, I did a podcast on the eviction tsunami not really taking place the way that a lot of politicians would have you believe. Oh, there's an eviction tsunami. 11 million Americans going to be kicked to the curb. That kind of came and went, didn't it? Yeah. Check out that podcast. That's an interesting one. All this stuff is, it's out there and it's going to unfold before us one way or the other. Just have to wait and see what happens on some of this stuff, right? All right. That's it for me on this one. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for being part of the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. I will catch up with you soon. Until then, stay safe. We'll talk again. Bye for now. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you'll know when our next video is out.